I'm Amanda Knox, and you're listening to Hard Knocks.
Monica!
Amanda!
I'm so excited to finally have you here, and we just had a baby.
Yeah, we did. Exactly. In fact, I just saw it for the first time on Vine and Sunset.
My God.
The beginning, I was like, the beginning evidence, but no, we'll not go with evidence. So
Well, it's an Italian, so we can play with the words because it doesn't have quite the same bad connotations. But it's this is a journey we've been on.
yeah.
Where to even begin? I think that, well, how about this question?
Mm-hmm.
Like, one of the things that I noticed as I've just been going out there doing some initial promotion of the series is that people have the question of whether or not I had anything creative to do with it. Like I got the question, oh, have you even seen the episodes yet? And I was like, I co-wrote the final episode. Like, of course I have. But then it occurred to me that this thing that we're doing is really unique and new for the industry.
Yeah. Well, I think that's where, I think for me, it was part of why I wanted to help tell this story was it was very unique for me to have been a producer on impeachment. And I think that Hollywood is very adept at people maybe being consulted on their story. You're never really going to get approval, but I think that there's a small amount of involvement. But to be a producer or an executive producer to stamp a project as being sanctioned by a person who had the lived experience, I understood when I was working on impeachment, and I understood even more as an EP on this project, having more distance from being a subject. And I get where there are difficulties, but I think everyone involved would also say that the project is so much richer for having these kinds of perspectives in it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I obviously think it's a better product because I was able to share really personal and intimate things about my life that wasn't just like a Hollywood gloss over reality. Like, it becomes, I think, dirtier in a good way because it has all the messy humanity, and you have all these like scenes that, I remember being in the writer's room being like, this is an actual thing that happened, and they were like, you can't make this stuff up. You can't.
Exactly.
Did you have similar experiences with impeachment?
Yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting, and I could get specific in a second, but I think what you're talking about and what I experienced in impeachment is that it's about capturing this emotional truth. Aaron Sorkin has this great line about that these kinds of biopics, if you will, that they're a painting, not a photograph. And I think that was a really important distinction for me to kind of come to learn, not having worked on any scripted projects. When I went into impeachment, I'd EP'd a documentary, but I hadn't worked on scripted. So I didn't understand what it meant to read something on the page and then see what it would look like, in having been filmed. So for me with impeachment, one of the many crossover points we have are interrogations.
Yay.
So for me, the most important thing was episode 6 of impeachment, which captured what the independent counsel's office and the FBI had called, the sting was called prom night. So because I was supposedly supposed to flip so quickly and easily in a hotel room.
Ew.
So
Ew.
I think they may have not been able to call the episode that for legal reasons. But so for me, that was, I felt like that was a portion of my experience that hadn't been captured in the media because it wasn't sexy enough or interesting enough, or at the time people saw me in a specific way, so it might have been too sympathetic for me at the time. But so that was really probably one of the most important things to me there. And
did you anticipate that having the same kind of resonance with me going into this project, or did
I
you sort of
didn't.
like uncover that?
I didn't. I think that there were so many moments in working on The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox, where I got so triggered and I hadn't expected to. Whether it was interrogation room, even though mine was in a hotel and yours was at a police precinct. Nicer environment, but it's still pretty fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, me, jail, what?
Yeah.
So I think there's that, and there are actually quite a few moments in episode 7 and 8 where, whether it is paparazzi, surrounding a car, and things with your family, moments with your family. Certainly, I think that I know we both and had talked about this at different times, and the process of giving notes on scripts and all those conversations and things about what it meant to have the media run away with your story.
Yeah. Here's a question. Do you think that the media has evolved, if at all, in how it like mythologizes or villainizes people since when you were first in the headlines?
Yes-ish. So I think, I constantly find in so many ways, I'm sure you do too with your advocacy work, is that you want change to happen so much faster than it does. And it's so important to recognize, the ways that there are small changes, even though it may not be as fast or as much as you want. So I do think that we are seeing ways that people are still writing clickbait headlines. That's still there. But I think we see more perspectives that come out. And what's also different is the news cycle is so much shorter. So the idea that you would have a story that would be on, the front page above the fold for more than 72 hours now is unheard of, let alone 6 months, or whatever length of time it was. So I think that also impacts things, but we see it in small ways. If you think about, someone corrected me once about, that people who have been the family members of those who've died by suicide prefer people saying died by suicide rather than committed suicide. So, we see these small kinds of, I'm sure in the exoneree world, there are all sorts of ways, that language is important. So, so that's a very long way of saying, yes, there's a bit of change. It's not changed drastically. A small thing for me, which was a huge win, was for people to stop calling it the Lewinsky scandal. So either huge. Now, at least now it'll be Clinton Lewinsky scandal or Clinton scandal or, Clinton impeachment, so Starr investigation. But I think that there are ways that we're thinking about those things more.
Yeah, what you call a thing really, really matters.
Yes.
That's, again...
Yes, Foxy Noxy.
Thank you. Yeah, or, like the Meredith Kircher murder instead of the Amanda Knox case.
Right.
It matters because it has this like weird, it focuses the attention. And I've had conversations with people online where they're like, well, what else are we supposed to call it? And it's like, what do you mean, what else are we supposed to call it? So that's interesting. Talking about like the how short the news cycle is now, or even just how short our attention spans are now.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, we are living in a world where all of our mistakes are potentially online forever. So even if they're not the headline of the moment, they still like haunt us potentially because they're so Googleable. And I'm wondering, like, I see a lot of like anxiety in young people, and I'm wondering if there's a part of anxiety in young people being this sort of either conscious or subconscious awareness that any mistake that they could possibly make could be used against them in ways that wouldn't have been used against them in the past. And I'm wondering, do you have any like thoughts about that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that my concern about the impact of the sort of indelible ink of the internet on young people is a lot of what has driven my advocacy work. In that I think not only being Gen X, I grew up at a time when, if you were embarrassed at school, right, that you were just embarrassed in front of this bordered entity that were all the people who were in your grade school, right? And now it's the online world. And that border is endless. Like there isn't even a border there. And I think that impact and seeing public stories, seeing big collective stories like your story or my story also play a role in how young people are thinking about the consequences of these kinds of stories that can be on the internet, whether it's something that ends up on, as a headline in a newspaper or a news show, or something that's just talked about and sent around with their, on social media of their friends. I'm not sure that just made sense, but I think that there's, it's one of the things that I felt for myself was, okay, if I could be a poster child for someone who was publicly humiliated and somehow got through, and that could help one young person or an older person, but particularly a young person whose brains aren't fully developed yet, right? Who don't have a sense of identity that you develop over time, or that the level of experiences of having fallen down and gotten back up.
Yeah.
And then the next time it happens, you're sort of like, oh yeah, this happened to me before and I was able to get back up. So,
Yes.
All those things, it does impact young people. It impacts everybody. And now I don't remember what your question was.
No. Great. No, I'm just thinking about that's one of going back to just what are some of the things that this show is attempting to accomplish. I remember, God, even when I first got home, first got home from prison, I was inundated with requests from directors and people, who had followed the story, who really cared about it, who were like, we want to make a movie or something. And I initially was I pushed back a lot because I was like, what you're saying you want is you want to make a movie about the worst experience of my life. And yeah, I got out of prison, but am I okay?
Yeah.
And what is this story about? I just all I did was wait around for someone to give me my life back. It doesn't feel like my story, and it certainly didn't feel redemptive in a way. It just felt like it just felt like, oh, here's my pain for entertainment some more. And I really pushed back up against the idea of doing a version of what we've done together for so long, because I didn't see where, first of all, where I emerged in the story. I didn't want it to just be trauma porn, and it wasn't until it clicked for me that, in those episodes, episode 7 and 8, when we see the other side of the curtain behind the getting out of prison and the rebuilding of a life and making sense of the senseless, that's what these stories are really about, is that redemptive arc, that emerging, that being buried and then that, re-emerging from that. Was that also when you were reaching out to me to do my story, did you have that in mind as well?
I think, yes, because I had, I think with impeachment, we were looking at a really enormous story through, that had political and media and legal ramifications. And we were looking at this story through a lens of 3 different perspectives, really. And we were lucky to get 10 episodes, but we didn't get to go into the aftermath. And it was something, I was so grateful when, we first talked to 20th, and when the showrunner and creator KJ Steinberg came on board, that there was this immediate understanding and interest to explore the aftermath. And it was interesting because a few months ago, I did a little introduction in LA for the international audience. I don't remember exactly what they're called, but showing them, sorry people, showing them the first episode and talking about, and it gets me emotional now too, of how important it is that we are showing what happens after. Because it's very easy, and I don't know about you, but I've certainly fallen victim of, I don't pay attention to a story after it's off the headlines. I don't think about how is this person rebuilding their life.
Yeah.
But I think to understand, as my therapist calls it, the long tail of trauma, and that it's not even just the person, but the collateral damage for people's families.
Yeah.
And so I'm so grateful that KJ and 20th and Hulu and Littlefield Company and you guys, everybody who has poured their heart and soul into this show has seen the value of showing this, because I think it is really important to understand about these kinds of collective stories.
Yeah.
So
and you just don't see it. You don't see it in true crime. You don't see it in scandal stories. It's always, here's the scandal, bam, and then you might get like some random, article. Where's Monica Lewinsky 10 years later? And it's always like, where is this person even getting this information from? And it's always just like superficial. It's not the story of like being a person and being gutted and then building your life back.
And having to find yourself again. I think that there's especially, this happens in these kinds of stories where they're grown-ups, and even though, you were only 20 and I was 24 when the investigation started. I was 22 when I went to Washington. 21, turned 22. Can't remember. That's what happens in perimenopause. You can't remember shit. It's great. But I think that you are, there's this trajectory as a young person where all you can do as a teenager is you're like, when I get to be 20 or 21 and I'm a grown up, can't even fucking rent a car yet on your own. But there's that sense, and I remember that feeling of like going away to college, and I'm an adult now. Look, I opened a credit card. Didn't totally understand. I was
in debt.
Exactly. I was, one of the embarrassing things of when I had to apply for the White House internship and then got my job there was you have to get security clearance. And when I moved to the Pentagon, I had really high security clearance because of my boss, who was the Pentagon spokesman. And I remember the sheepish moment of like, oh, fuck, here's my Laura Ashley credit card that I got without realizing I was actually going to have to pay this. And so I had to figure out a way to settle that debt, in order to get security clearance. That sounds pretty terrifying, actually. But I think that, kind of to the point of you're a young person and you think you know everything. You think you know who you are. And it's then ripped away from you. It's reconfigured and reflected back to you as a monster that you never saw yourself as, that you actually aren't. But people find ways of believing that's who you are. And it's really hard. It's really hard to hold on to your sense of self. It's hard to remember that you have value as a human. I've struggled before everything happened, which is, part of how I ended up in the situation I was in, was not having enough sense of self-worth or, self-esteem.
Yeah. And
to try to find that, I still find, I'm like almost 28 years out from the scandal, and there's still issues of self-worth that I struggle with that are more connected to what happened to me rather than just whatever my issues were coming into 1998.
Makes sense. What did people in your life do to help you feel like you were a human being who had value again?
The most important thing, and I think I try to impart to people when they ask, what can you do for someone who's been publicly shamed or experienced bullying or cyberbullying, which, public shaming is a part of, right? Yep. If you can't be publicly shamed, you can't actually be bullied.
Right.
So is that sense of reflecting back to someone their true self. And so for me, that was my family at first, because I wasn't allowed to talk to any of my friends for, yeah. So the first time I was able to talk to a friend was my best friend from college, Catherine, who's still one of my best friends. She was called back from Tokyo, where she and her husband were living at the time, and she had to testify before the grand jury. So, get lawyers, come and testify, come in. They took her computer, and our lawyers had talked, and Catherine's lawyer was saying, they had agreed that they thought after Catherine had gone to the grand jury that we'd be legally safe to kind of spend time together. And I was so petrified that I might have said something on the 20 hours of tapes that Linda Tripp had made of our phone calls that I didn't know, sometimes I'm a catty bitch.
Aren't we all occasionally? Yes.
If you really want to know who you are, have somebody tape record your conversation surreptitiously. But that didn't happen. And Catherine and I got to spend the day together. And I think I've often talked about that being a really important marker for me of okay, I can survive this. I have my family. I was so lucky to have my family stand by me. And, that moment was like, oh, okay, I have a friend in the world. Catherine's parents didn't say, under no circumstances can you still be friends with this person.
Right.
Your friendship with her just cost us thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fees. And this is this horrific scandal in the country, around the world. So for me, that was such an important moment. And moving forward, then Catherine and I, our senses of humor are similar. So before I was going to the grand jury, we, because we now could talk on the phone at that point, and she was like, so what are you wearing to the GJ? And it was like, well, it was one of those things. And so I think just the ability to have someone who saw all sides of me, still embrace those sides of me. She brought me a stuffed animal that I still have. And so those moments. I couldn't talk to my brother for many months.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
How is that even humanly viable? I don't.
Everybody wrongly assumes in our country that there's a parent-child privilege, or family, because there is spousal privilege, right? That comes from common law because we were men's property, so couldn't even have.
Although parents technically owned their children also technically.
I guess. I don't know. That's an interesting point. So, but even though the DOJ is discouraged from ever having parents testify against kids or kids testifying against their parents, it is legal in this country. And so my mom was forced to testify against me. And I think our lawyers had advised that we, try to keep as much distance as possible. So I was very careful with my dad and stepmom. I was very careful with my stepdad. It's a shitty thing that happens in our country. I wish, even in times there have been more recent cases where there have been questions of parents and children working in the same companies and being forced to testify against them, I still feel if that's the only way you are going to get the evidence you need to convict somebody, I'm not sure that's really the best way forward for humanity in our country, but I digressed. So my younger brother, I think when we were able to finally kind of be together again, he did a really wonderful job. I'm laughing inside because he just kept me real. He was like, there's some version of what do you think, you're special? So just as younger siblings do.
Yeah, perfect.
It just was kind of, it was sort of a like, oh no, I get that. Like I called it first, you know, even in our 20s. And then, you know, there was a really sweet moment where he had said to me, to the rest of the world, you might be Monica Lewinsky, but to me, you'll always still be Monka, which is my family nickname.
Sweet.
And so I think those kinds of moments, as small as they are, I don't know, I imagine you have some too.
Everything you're telling me also just reminds me of like even moments in the show where like, oh wow, of course you were triggered by like this scene where my little sister is like holding me to account and like keeping it real with me. Like, of course you're like, you experienced that on your own. So one thing I have a question about, because this story is not just about like how the world sort of, your story and my story isn't just how the world changed to allow us to be human beings again, but also things that we did that, you know, rational or not rational, we did to feel human again. That's a big story arc in The Twisted Tale of Amanda Knox. I'm wondering, like, what kind of things did you do, and did you find yourself ever in conflict with your support system the way that I found myself?
That's interesting. That's an interesting thing, because I'm not sure that I got that from you, that you were ever in conflict of your support system. So are you referencing more your decisions?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
got it. So I think for me, it was like one of the best and worst things for me was how young I was and how powerless I was. Because I was by at least 20 years younger than every other of the major players in my story. And because of those things, I was forced to evolve. I didn't have a system around me that was going to yes me or needed me for their careers to flourish. I think that for me, it was, I just kept trying. And in different ways, my family was always trying to encourage me. My mom is like very Pollyanna-ish, and it would be super fucking annoying. But at the same time, I needed those anchors. Even if I was pushing against it, they provided hope somewhere inside me that, okay, maybe I will be able to go outside again one day. Oh, maybe I will be able to go outside without a hat, or, you know, all those, or use my real name somewhere. And
simple thing like getting a cup of coffee at a Starbucks. And
Yeah.
be like, yeah, my name is.
Exactly. So there were ways that I had to move through different stages of being ready to heal and evolve. And I would take one step forward and then 3 steps back. So I think what's coming up for me now, I'm not totally sure why, but there came a point where, I guess it was after I came back from graduate school, and it became clear nobody was going to hire me. That was a pretty dark time for me. And I think I came into a lot of understanding of what had really been taken from me and my anger many years on. And my mom had been, you know, hammering at me of, you know, the best way to feel better is to go help other people. And it took me forever to be able to try to do that. And I finally found a program downtown at the court system where you do art with kids whose parents are going through the legal system, or who may be taken away from their parent, like that whole thing. And I thought, okay, this is somewhere. I love kids. Kids love me. I like art. Has to do with the justice system, the whole thing. Finally, get up the courage to go to the training for the program, and I do it. And then the woman who runs the program calls me, and she had said, you know, I'm just worried that the parents of these kids are not going to want you, you know, are going to go to the press and are not going to want you to be doing something with their children. And, you know, there are these moments where you took this step forward and you take a bunch of steps back. And but you also find a strength in yourself. And some of it, I think this might be your experience too. If justice is something that's really important to you, there's a part of you that fights back against the injustice, and that fuels you somehow to take another step forward.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, there were those cases, but it took me a long time to find the right support systems. And even now, I have to remind myself, just the other day in, starting to prepare for what we're doing now of birthing this show with everybody else, I was like, okay, I have to remember I have to make a list. How am I taking care of myself physically? How am I taking care of myself emotionally? How am I taking care of myself spiritually? What are the additional things I need to do? Because I know that's the extra support I need to be able to show up and to try to do the best I can do. That was a very long-winded answer.
I love a long-winded answer.
So,
I'm queen of long-winded answers and forgetting what the question was.
Don't ever let me leave you a voice memo. Those memes of your friend says, "What happened?" Nothing, and then no, really, what happened? And then it's the hour and a half long voice memo. Yeah, Instagram has shown me I might have ADHD, so we'll see.
I mean, the best of us do. Speaking of helping other people, you helped me so much with this. And, of course, in ways that I didn't know or wasn't prepared for because I hadn't gone through this experience and you had. Were there, and, let's just talk about them for a second. I was surprised when I tend to approach people kind of open-heartedly and sort of assume that whatever I'm experiencing is transparent to them. But there have been moments in the making of this series where I was just like, oh, I don't think people in the room are understanding the depths of why something is important to me.
Yeah.
Or even just the way that they're communicating. There are certain sort of deep little assumptions that they're making in the way that they're communicating that are not the best assumptions. Mm-hmm. And I've been so constantly in my life in a position of having to defend and explain myself constantly. And it has been such a relief when you have swooped in and defended and explained me for me.
I'm so glad. That was my job.
That was your job.
That was part of my job, I think in being an executive producer and wanting to help tell these kinds of stories, it's about, and everybody on the team, cares about you. And, their intention was always right. And I know you know that.
Of course.
There are just there's a unique kind of trauma that we've experienced. And it comes with a set of circumstances that are very hard to understand no matter how good your intentions are, unless you've experienced it. And so sometimes, and I think our partners on this from, KJ to the Littlefield Company to 20th to Hulu, they have all been great at of, I think, recognizing, we may not totally understand why this is important, but our two people who have been subjects and have lived through a public kind of trauma are reflecting to us that this is important.
And we're going to try to understand. Yeah.
And they do.
Yeah.
Whether they agreed with it or not.
Right.
And I think that's sometimes what can make these projects more challenging, but also can be at the same time what's so important for the way we're telling stories in our world.
Yeah. I think that's for me a sign of the big shift in Hollywood is the care that isn't just about can we make the splashiest show that makes the most money. It's the care to what is the impact on the individual. That I've been so encouraged by that.
And I learned with impeachment was this idea of you may not always get your way, but you're heard, you know? And so I felt heard on many things, and I had to come to understand many things, which I understood more in this process of like, just even being on the other side of just, you know, being an executive producer, trying to help shepherd through a subject. And you'll see if you do this for someone else, you'll have moments where you'll go, oh man, I can't believe I wrote notes like this, or I thought this, or I said this. And you've been an incredible partner on this project. But there just will be those things that you can't understand until you're really looking at it. And also able to, you know, and you did a great job with this of being able to separate yourself from your trauma and understanding, okay, this is what's needed to tell a story. And while it may not be this photograph, the painting of it is the emotional truth.
Right.
And the emotional truth is there and what's important. But the less you have of that, the easier it is to sort of understand storytelling.
Right.
And I think you came into this process having a better sense. I mean, I also write, but I think you had a better sense of storytelling than I did coming into this scripted process. So, yeah.
Totally.
But I'm so glad that you felt supported that way at times, and that was, you know.
Any big lessons, advice for like if I'm shepherding someone in their project? What's a big piece of advice you could give me?
Yeah, I guess I have found this to be with everything. I mean, I think I found it with my podcast that I launched this year too, of it is so much more work and harder than you ever could imagine. You know, it's been a very rewarding process, you know, and I'm very grateful. I feel, I'm sure you do too, I feel like I've gotten to learn at the feet of some extraordinarily talented and successful people in Hollywood, and people who have brought so much care and their soul of, you know, to this project and to trying to tell these stories. And I think, you know, for me, I was drawn to from the beginning this idea of here is yet another young woman who has been feasted on by the world for myriad reasons and in myriad ways. But what I hadn't quite expected was for there to also be, you know, the layer of this story that is broader and about other people, which you came into this knowing because you do the advocacy work in the wrongful conviction space and exoneree world. But I think for me, there was another light that went on, another passion that arose for me in helping to tell this story, around thinking about, oh, more people are going to learn, you know, are going to learn like that this happens, that wrongful convictions, and maybe it's my own naivete, maybe I didn't pay attention enough. But I feel like I'm a fairly well-read person.
Interested in the legal system.
Exactly.
You know? Yeah.
I'm up on current events and things, and this was not something that I understood in the same way. And I think, you know, one of the things that KJ and has done that we've all, you know, cottoned onto as being so important is the spine of the show being the anatomy of bias.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, can we explain what that is so that people will understand it when they see the show? Yeah.
Right. So I think that the for me, right, the broader picture and what makes this show different than just, you know, a retelling of bits and pieces of facts and stories that people think they know, or,
right,
you know, no matter how closely they followed the case, with the spine of the show being the anatomy of bias, what we are doing is we are storytelling through the perspective of different people and showcasing the ways that these things happen. It's not necessarily what exactly happened, it's how did it happen. Mm-hmm. And how it happened, you know, is through the different ways. I mean, I know, like, we talk about, I don't know that we talked about this with the show, but I know for myself, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, like the primacy effect, Like people wonder, well, why do some of these things still stick 10, 20, almost 30 years on? And it's because it's what they learned first.
Yeah.
You know, or it's a confirmation bias. I mean, you can spout out some of the many biases that we look at.
The primary bias is also known as the anchoring bias.
Right.
Like written,
So it is just and I think that it's the way we storytell, and it's the way we process a story in our own minds that is impacted by everything we're bringing to that moment that has been shaped by bias upon bias upon bias.
Yeah.
And I think that that's, we tried, and this was important to you. It was important to KJ. I remember our first Zoom meeting with KJ and Chris, your husband, who's also an EP on the project. It was the four of us, and we had these incredible moments of, I think we cried like 3 or 4 different times in the meeting. And just this, you brought a desire to not just have mustache twirling villains. And it so matched with the creative vision KJ had brought to that initial meeting.
Yes.
And it was just so obvious this was a perfect marriage for creative minds, for social impact.
Yeah. And I didn't even realize, we started doing this like 3 years ago. Like, geez, how long have we been working on this how long have we been pregnant with this project? But like, that idea of people see what they want to see.
Yeah.
And does the truth exist if nobody believes it? Like, those are not just like small questions. These are like universal questions that we deal with in big and small ways every single day. Every interaction that we have with a person is not just a straight interaction. It is colored by the context that we all carry. Like, all of us are little universes inside of ourselves, and we collide with each other. And how do those collisions go well, and how do they go wrong? And like, even just, there's language barrier in this show, but like, language barrier can be looked at also as a metaphor for like the language barriers that even two people who technically speak the same language have different understandings of even different words within this shared common language. Like, there's so much that can go right and wrong when people become perfect storms around each other. And I think that's like one of these sort of universal messages of the show that I'm so proud of, that we had the opportunity to do with this show. Right. And again, you're right, because we got so lucky to be working with people who got it. Can we talk about how lucky we are for a second?
Yeah. I mean, it's like we got to work with a lot of brave, big-hearted creatives.
And we got to like do a thing like this. Like, not everyone who goes through a crazy experience gets to do a thing like this.
But that's part of why, I have felt, and you may come to feel moving on from this experience, that it's so important to help try to give those opportunities to other people and to shepherd it through, and that each person gets to go a little farther than you did. Like, it brings me so much joy that we were able to do this with you less than 20 years after it happened.
Hey.
And so that's, but maybe the next person, it's less than 15. And that's the point, is that I think as we, hopefully this becomes something that is, it's not always possible to have a subject involved, but that it's something that becomes more accepted and happens more often. And it's its own specific kind of storytelling. And we got lucky with brave partners, and in every sense, it's
Did you feel like, I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt a little bit pressured personally, like putting pressure on myself to always be the best creative partner that I could be, because I was afraid that if the people I worked with had a bad experience working with me, they wouldn't want to work with the next person.
100%.
I was just terrified
and
of
I
that.
think sometimes there had been, not a lot, but I think there had been moments where, on my end, I'm a big overthinker. I probably over worried about certain things that were happening, or may have communicated something to you of a concern that may have not always landed the right way. And I think that's, it's very hard. You'll see when you do it for someone else, you'll understand it's harder to see certain things, like no matter how good, and you have been a fantastic creative partner. I've remarked to people many times on the show, like, I certainly wouldn't have agreed to that quickly. I would have been more triggered there, So, but I think there is that, it is something that's really has been important to me, is to try to protect that, to try to protect your experience, but also to protect this idea that you can make something entertaining in this world of Hollywood, and people can consume it, and you can still have had someone's voice involved in a way that you have not created something that's a hagiography. And that was sort of I think that was a North Star for all of us, you included, which is, and I had felt that way with impeachment. There were things that, there were a few things where they said, well, we think we can do this without having to go into, the thong thing. And I was like, nope, we got to show the thong thing. Like, it's, you can't ask to do this kind of storytelling without showing all of the parts of you, because it's just, what's the point?
Yeah.
Right,
that's
just
then
kind of how I feel about life. Like, what's the point if you're not going to show up and just be as raw and human and real as you can be?
I think someone like us would have the fear that, like, it's this interesting balancing effect of, like, one thing that a lot of wrongly convicted people feel like, even after they've, like, been proven innocent and vindicated and everything, is that, all that said, they're going to spend the rest of their lives having to prove their innocence every single day, because the accusation never goes away. And I think that there is this, like, interesting tension that we as scandalized people feel acutely, but I think that my impression is that everyone is sort of feeling this in a simmering way at the very least, is it's like, how do I reckon with the person who I am, who is like a messy, evolving process of a person, with the fact that we also live in a world that is very quick to sort of label people, to define people, to define people as like good or bad, and like how do you think? And I think about this a lot because people ask me this question, like, how do you make room for yourself to be a process, and maybe a process that is not, perfect.
Yeah.
And not feeling the pressure to just be good or to prove that you're good. Like, what in the process of, and especially in the process of storytelling, we're thinking about storytelling and the value it is to like reclaim, your own narrative, your own voice. Like, are we stuck in this like loop of being caught in our narratives, or like, this is something I'm thinking about all the time.
Yeah.
Like, how do I hold on to what I can build and make beautiful, and like do something good with something, and also not feel completely obsessed with it or a slave to it? Tell me, like, that was a weird, convoluted question. Yeah,
not at all. I mean, or if it was, I followed you.
Thank you.
So,
yes.
I'm gonna have a sip
yes,
of
me
water.
too. Drink break.
Hydrate.
I was once on a podcast where they had a banana break.
Oh.
Yeah, everyone just had a chat, and then like...
It's a funny, I eat a banana before, I ate a banana on the way here.
There you
and
go.
I eat a banana before I interview someone. It's just the potassium and the sugar.
Yeah, gives you that boost.
remember growing up, my mom used to always say, eat a banana before you go to a party and you'll glow at the party. I was like, I don't even know what that means, but.
No one told me this banana secret. I was told to eat parsley.
Oh, really?
Yeah, for the iron. That's what
Okay.
I don't know.
Note to self. So it's what you're asking is so interesting, and I get asked this a fair amount. I've been in a position where a lot of people will reach out to me who've been publicly shamed in different ways and ask for help.
Yeah.
And
What do I do?
Right. And I try. My rule is always it's confidential on both sides. Like, that is, I'm not going to talk about you and your situation, and you're not going to talk about me and that I did this and what I said. And because it's also different in different circumstances.
Yeah.
I told someone once, like, who'd gotten into medical school, and she was saying, but my narrative, and I was like, fucking go to medical school. It's not always the right thing to go out and tell your story publicly. Mm-hmm. I think the thing that is hard to understand is there is no one size fits all for every situation. For me, I think what I found was the most difficult part was getting over the hump of the balance of the old version of me and my true self, and people coming to see me as my true self. That was sort of a really big driver for me when I wrote the Vanity Fair article in 2014, which was sort of my first choosing to step back into the public arena. Mm-hmm. One of my goals was to be seen as my true self. And
which, by the way, the first moment of you becoming a little bit of a big sister mentor for me was like me reading that and being like, I recognized that desire in myself, mm-hmm. in you, and I had never heard anybody express it that way before. Mm-hmm. And it was so validating. Like, again, sorry. Continue.
Yeah, no. No, it's, it's interesting because those kinds of moments, though, that you're reflecting are really important to this bigger concept of what we're talking about, because I take in every time someone says, your article helped me, your TED Talk helped me, this episode of the podcast helped me, your anti-bullying kit, whatever it is, I take that in because it really is a privilege to help ease someone else's suffering. Ugh. And that fills my soul and fills my identity. So for me, what I see now is that it's like I used to just get crushed over every negative article or horrible photo that was out there. And as I was able to slowly start to take control of my narrative, and there were more and more things that were out there that were not horrible, it just started to balance things out. You just start to care a little less. I don't, one thing I've always done for myself, I've never had a Google alert for my name, because I felt there were periods of time where I checked every day, but I was in control of when I would see whether or not there was something out there.
Right. It wasn't just going to pop up. Exactly.
It wouldn't control me. I would be in control of knowing this is a possibility about what could happen. And so I feel like it's this slow process that happens of you being more consumed with your true self than the version of you that has been painted. It also never goes away. It's also still there. There's also, as we prepare to, birth the show and doing press and doing these things, I just yesterday, had a little bit of a panic meltdown about I still have a fear of losing everything. I have a fear of misstepping. So, this idea of
when everything can be taken away from you, and it has been. It's
and
like,
it has been in, that still lives there for me. You know, I try to trust more. I have seen so much grace from people being given to me that I try to remind myself there's a lot of grace there, you know, and people have a sense of, you know, who I am now. So I would hope there'd be that elasticity there. But I don't know, you know, so I think there's, it's just this, it's this elastic process that kind of, it's like loosening a knot, you know, it just kind of, it gets a little easier, it gets a little softer. You think you're about to undo it and then it gets tighter, you know, it just, but I also think it's a different form. Maybe it has a different name or is in a different folder, but it's what everybody goes through in different ways. Like nobody gets left out from shit happening in their lives. Some people it's physical, some people it's emotional, some people it's
relational,
right? Exactly, or all the above, you know. So I try to remind myself of that too. Like there are reflections to me of so many people going through things every day that they're getting through that I'm amazed by. And so that fuels me too.
So one thing that I think you and I have in common that I think has been really helpful for both of us, and that has also been one of the things that we've been trying to accomplish with this show, is having a sense of humor.
Oh, yeah.
Because, well, and in fact, when I told my younger sister, so I just got, if you can tell my voice is a little bit less of itself, it's because I just spent a bachelorette weekend with my little sisters in Las Vegas. For, you know, my youngest sister's getting married. And my youngest. So Delaney. Congratulations, Delaney.
Woohoo!
Yeah, she's getting married, and so I was out with her and her girlfriends, and I mentioned that I was going to be interviewing you, and all of them, all these little 25-year-olds, were so excited that I was going to talk to you, and in their minds, they were like, "Oh my God, Monica's a queen. She is so funny." I know. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about humor.
Yeah.
And why having a sense of humor is so valuable when you've just been fucked.
Yeah. And not in a good way. You know, like I could not have, nor my family, like we could not have survived 98 and the years that followed without being able to laugh at some of the worst moments. I mean, from early on, literally like in between the FBI sting and I know I'm in really deep shit. And the rest of the world finding out I'm in really deep shit. Like we were, I remember that my mom and I were going to leave the apartment. So the public doesn't know. So we're not, you know, I can leave the house. Like I can go, nobody knows who I am. And, you know, I remember, you know, like leaning into the lampshade because we were just assumed everything was bug now. So I was like, we're just going to the market, you know, into the lampshade, or, you know, Ken Starr is very attractive. You know, it was just like all these, because there is the absurdity and the enormity of what you are going through. Is just, it's so challenging to actually metabolize. When these kinds of things happen, it's an enormous life shift. It's not something gradual. And it's so out of the ordinary. You know, and part of what, at least what I observed of part of your story and what happened to you and how it happened to you was this period of time where you're being observed and considered as a potential suspect, and you think you're just being helpful. You know, and so there are these ways that you I don't know why I went there. So, but
because I'm a goofball.
But I mean, I think it's like they're just the enormity of certain situations. And I think for me, always like humor. I was really lucky. I got to interview John Oliver for my podcast recently. And so I know, it was great.
Amazing.
He had interviewed me a few years ago. And so we had a huge discussion about gallows humor and the importance of it. And so, and him being British, like I have a very British sense of humor. And sometimes I get in trouble because my line is different than other people's line of,
Oh yeah, I know how that is.
What is, what's considered appropriate humor. But there's magic in the resonance of humor. There's magic in the resonance of laughter that is vital to surviving something difficult. And I just think that, kind of tacking back to that idea of holding on to your true self, how others are reflecting your true self, how you're moving from being just the headline that you're given or the Google search or, the tittering, whatever, however you're moving on from those things. Like if you cannot laugh at yourself, you are so fucked.
Yeah.
I don't even know that you could survive like without an ability to step outside the heaviness of a moment.
That pressure valve that...
Yeah.
And it's a pressure valve that's both personal and communal, right? It's that limbic resonance. Yes.
Exactly. So I mean, there was, in doing my TED Talk, there was a moment in the first few minutes where I told this funny, inappropriate story of, like a 20-year-old guy hitting on me when I was 40.
Yeah.
And that,
which is so appropriate.
Exactly. I was just on a girls' week trip and someone told us they had seen on Instagram that it's, instead of calling it perimenopause, we're now going to call it cougar puberty. So I was, stepping into my cougar puberty.
Oh my God, I love that.
At that point. But I had gotten some very smart people had given me feedback that I was sexualizing myself at the beginning of what was a really important moment and talk. And I felt so strongly that there needed to be this release of tension.
Yeah.
That not only I had, as you're saying, like releasing the valve, but that the audience needed to have, and that needed to happen collectively. And I think those kinds of things are really important with these bigger collective stories, and you heard me say so many times, like, can only change as much as the collective is ready for it to change. And it is such a hard thing to hold, to be a subject and a person inside a collective story, and to be able to accept it can only change as much as everybody is ready for it to change.
Right. It has a life of its own.
It does.
Because it belongs to all of us.
It does. And it can be so frustrating and maddening, and like my next lifetime, I am not, I don't want to come back to earth, but also I'd like to choose an easier life lesson and, all the things. And so but those, it is all part of it. And I think that there are moments that I know were important to you, important to KJ, moments of humor that we felt, and your humor sometimes went farther than mine. Sometimes my notes were like, I'm not sure we need this here, but like, that's the whole point of humor, right? Yeah. Is both finding a shared common experience, but also being forced to stretch, at times. So, yeah, exactly.
Well, on that note, just thank you so much, Monica, for being on Hard Knocks.
Thank you, Amanda. This was so nice.
Yay.
Really nice.
Yeah,
thank you.
All right, where can everyone follow you and find you and do all those things?
I'm on Instagram and still Twitter, not as active as they used to be, but on those, my handle is at Monica Lewinsky and at Monica_Lewinsky. Mm-hmm. Where else am I?
You have Reclaiming Podcast.
Oh, right, I have... Oops. I have a podcast called Reclaiming with Monica Lewinsky that you can find on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Listen to your podcasts.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Monica.
Thank you, Amanda.